All right, everyone, welcome to the basics of standard operating procedures for indoor agriculture. My name is Jason Hadley. I am a sales manager for Filter. I am also not just a floating head on your screen, but I am also a helpful guide to building a successful microbe control program that happens to include clean room grade air purification thanks to Filter. Wink, wink. All right, so what we're going to be covering here is a guide in building consistent processes for quality management training and ultimately profitability. All right, so let's get started on what we will be covering today. So we're going to be covering what are standard operating procedures. Some of us may not be completely familiar with the process. Why are they important to your cannabis facility operations? Okay, I should say essential in addition to important. We'll also be covering employees and where standard operating procedures can fail, because they can, and there's a number of reasons for that. How to prepare for writing a standard operating procedure. If you believe it, there is a standard operating procedure for preparing a standard operating procedure. We'll also cover the parts of a standard operating procedure. They have very specific parts, and we'll do a run through of a finished standard. Let's try that again. We'll do a run through of a finished standard operating procedure, okay? So this is all super important and comes together in the big picture of helping you operate more efficiently, okay? And this is nothing that hasn't already been done in other industries. Again, you'll hear me mention that quite a bit. So who we are, we're gonna do a little bragging on ourselves here just so you understand where our street cred comes from. So Filter is manufactured by Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions. Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions is the provider of particle monitoring systems for real-time applications such as pharmaceutical manufacturing, automotive manufacturing, what have you. I'll cover some of that in a second. But what we do is research and development. We do pilot production. We do service and installation of large-scale systems. We do finance and accounting, though no one's ever called us for that, in my history at least. But I've only been with the company a few years, so I'm sure we do that. And then, of course, quality assurance as well. So we are manufactured, Filter's manufactured, and Lighthouse products are manufactured out of Medford, Oregon. We do manufacturing, we do calibration and instrument servicing, we do system builds, we do system service, we do quality assurance, as well as project management. The name Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions would imply that we are all over the world, which is in fact the case. Now we have 4 offices here in the United States, in Fremont, California, where we're headquartered, Medford, Oregon, again, where we're manufactured. We have a training center in Arizona, and we have calibration services for our FDA compliant products, which is pretty much all of them. They're in Philadelphia, along with offices in Thailand, Malaysia, China, the Netherlands, Turkey, and beyond. Markets that we serve include the semiconductor clean room manufacturing space, surprisingly and amazingly clean environments, aerospace as well, automotive, pharmaceutical, medical device production, as well as in recent years, horticulture, because horticulture in and of itself is starting to become more and more regulated, and we have decades of experience in working within highly regulated markets, particularly those as it relates to cleanliness. Some of our notable clients in the life sciences industry, of course, include Bayer. We also do work for Merck, right? Merck is the manufacturer of that horse paste y'all can't get enough of. We do Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, Novartis, Glaxo, the list goes on in life science. Electronics, we're serving NASA, Apple, Samsung, Raytheon, SpaceX. Tesla is our next door neighbor, right? We also, from an indoor agriculture standpoint, have been doing work with such notables as the Jungle Boys, Cookies, Happy Healing Farms out in Grants Pass, Oregon, Tweed, Cannabis, etc. So standard operating procedures, we're going to cover the basics. I know that looks wildly complicated, and some of you are thinking these are wildly complicated, but they're not really at the end of the day, as long as we can kind of break it down into an essential process, all right? So what is a standard operating procedure and who uses them? So a standard operating procedure, an SOP, is basically your daily operations playbook, okay? So the object of the game here is that consistent processes make for consistent outcomes. And shout out to anybody who noticed the top of that playbook has the word blunt on it. I did not do that on purpose. I found that after I built the webinar, so yeah. All right, so who uses Who uses standard operating procedures? Well, a variety of industries and verticals use them. So you see SOPs in manufacturing, you see SOPs in warehousing, hotels have SOPs, right? Because they have to make sure to like not change the sheets properly and not wash the remote control properly. If you've ever taken a black light to a hotel room, universities and those types of campuses have standard operating procedures. And of course, restaurants are huge in standard operating procedures. I mean, let me put it this way. You don't go to McDonald's for the nutritional value of their food and their great taste. It's just that a Big Mac tastes the same in Wichita, Kansas as it does in United Arab Emirates, right? Because they sell a process, they sell a standard operating procedure. They have their consistency down to a science. In fact, you actually, here's fun trivia for the day. If you ever buy into a McDonald's franchise, you have to go to something called Hamburger University, which is just outside of Chicago. It is a real college. I don't know how their football team is, but yeah, you have to learn everything that they do in a McDonald's the way they do it. No choices. Standard operating procedure. Okay, so let's talk about some of the benefits of using standard operating procedures. So SOPs, again, consistency of your process. These are a tool that you can use for employee training. You obviously can increase the operational efficiency of your facility. These, when you get them codified and you get them like finally like ironed out, it avoids a lot of miscommunications because you should be creating a document that is basically something you can hand off, which I'll cover in a second. You can increase the safety level of your employees by making sure that within their SOPs that there is like whatever safety equipment's needed, ladders and fall protection and what have you. Standard operating procedures also help in aiding with regulatory compliance. Whatever you're held compliant to, whether it's construction mandates or microbial mandates or packaging and labeling mandates or what have you. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's easy to transfer the work to somebody. You can literally take the page out of the SOP book and you can hand it to somebody, and if it's done right, they should be able to follow it to a T. They should have very few questions and be able to work on their own. There's an opportunity in using SOPs to analyze your process and catch mistakes or reveal liabilities, whether they're physical or safety liabilities or liabilities in the quality of your product, what have you. SOPs are also amazing for accountability and tracking. And that's not to say that this is about pointing the finger at people when they mess something up, but when something has been done, how it was done, who it was done by, who signed off on it, what kinds of revisions were done to that document, et cetera, and so forth. And then of course you can use SOPs to help scale up your operations as well, because if you're really kicking ass in your facility, clearly the name of the game is expansion and scaling up. So all of this speaks to what is colloquially known as GMP, or good manufacturing processes, good manufacturing practices, depending on what your version of the P is. So this is a sort of a conglomerate of concepts that are used to run factories and across varying verticals, including a high focus on risk management, developing quality management systems such as SOPs, managing your site and your facilities. This is about product control, quality assurance, and obviously you want to make sure that you have proper personnel training and competency testing in place, because at the end of the day, the reason we're in this business is for dollar bills. It's cool. There's no shame to this game, right? We all know why we got into it. So where can one apply standard operating procedures? Easy question, big answer. Any process or task that you want done your way, by your method, to your specifications, without you having to be there to watch them do it, right? I'm sure there's a long list of cats on here, and a bunch of you have had to wear a bunch of different hats, right? You're watering plants, you're taking out the trash, you're cleaning up, you're doing room resets, blah, 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 blah. Wait, let me stop for a question. You can take notes. None of this will be on the test. We will have a version of this available for download. Also, let me handle some administrative stuff as well. Please be aware that there is a Q&A here if you do want to put questions in as we go. And then we also have a short survey at the end of this, part of which is to kind of help determine what you guys want to know. You know, like, I mean, the reason we're doing an SOP webinar is because at the last air filtration webinar, which we'll send you the link for when we follow up on this one, right, Jonathan? We will have all of this stuff available for download for you. There will be this video here along with the slides and a template as well. So, okay, there we go. We handled the admin side. So, big question here, right? You've tried to employ SOPs in the past. They didn't take. There's often quite a few reasons why this happens. Some of this now we're starting to kind of tiptoe into like management and leadership training, admittedly. Sorry, I got an email. So why do SOPs fail? Okay, a number of reasons. And I think it helps to understand the nature of why that SOP fails, because then you can take that process and figure out ways to improve it or to get people to adhere to it better. So first and foremost, there are employees who just simply don't believe in the process. I don't see mold, so there's no mold. Well, that's a crock of hooey, because you can do plenty of sampling to show that there's a problem, because the problem that you're fighting, you can't see with the naked eye. And if you can see it with the naked eye, it is way out of control at that point, right? Because we want to try to catch this stuff like right when it hits surfaces or right when it's in the air. But there are, you know, some of the old dogs that are like, I didn't get into this industry to fill out paperwork and adhere to process, but hey, here we are. Okay, so in some cases, SOPs aren't followed because the employees are not seeing the impact of their work on customers. So in many cases, you know, sometimes this is kind of speaks to the morale side of things, where if you're getting reviews on your final product, like on Wheat Maps or whatever, like post those around the office, post those around the shop, let your workers know that the work that they're doing actually has a positive effect on the customers, and it's helping to fuel the business, because when your product doesn't sell, you don't have a job anymore, right? Okay. SOPs sometimes often fail because like the people that are performing them don't have a sense of ownership. Like they're not seeing the bigger picture. You know, in some cases, and I hate to say this, this is like super taboo to like anybody who owns a facility, but you know, maybe if they hit a 3 alike goal or something like that, people get bonused in, or you know, whatever, money talks, right? I'm just saying. SOPs often fail because employees think they can get away with laxity. That's not from the root word laxative, right? Because that involves a lot more cleanup. But no, they think they can get away with being lazy, because let's put it, you know, let's be real. Like up until probably about 5 or 6 years ago, you just kind of threw a bunch of plants in a warehouse and saw what they did, right? And you took what was good and sold it. So that's not, you know, the cannabis industry is really starting to kind of have to like get hip to the idea of like discipline and accountability and like, you know, things that like actually working jobs the way jobs are worked. Sorry, it's where we are. Blame the voters. They thought it was going to be raining weed in the streets. They had no idea what it was going to take to actually get it to market in a safe manner. But here we are. So SOPs fail because sometimes employees want to innovate. They have a better idea of how to do things. And, you know, I don't necessarily see this one as a bad thing. I mean, that to me says that this is the person that you want to hire from within and promote from within. Well, you hire them and you promote them from within and you get them up the ladder, because these are people that got some get up and go, some gumption, right? You know, and maybe you can figure out a way within your operation to create a way where if somebody wants to innovate something, that they bring it to you first, as opposed to going all maverick on your SOP, right? You just set up that process. And oftentimes SOPs fail because employees are not properly trained. So this kind of speaks to going back to like when you onboard new employees, to have a template ready to go of everything that they need to know, so that they know the first on day 2 after their training, or whatever your training process is, that they know the same level of knowledge as the person that's been there for 3 years. You know what I mean? And of course, these SOPs can be used for training as well. SOPs often fail because they're not seeing the impact on the big picture. You know, they're not understanding, like, I mean, let's face it, like people who are doing a lot of the cleaning, that's Charlie work, it's bitch work, right? Nobody wants to do it. The people who are doing the cleaning are oftentimes the lowest paid employees on the totem pole. And you know, it's like, they're not incentivized to care, and they don't understand how it plays into the scope of the big picture. okay? Oftentimes SOPs fail because employees are disengaged, again, kind of speaks to company morale. You can't just come in and, visit your spot once a month and start squawking about everything that's wrong. They call that seagull management, where you come in and you're all, caw, 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 and then you just fly off. It's a thing, it's a real thing. SOPs can fail because the process is too complicated. So keep that in mind to keep things simple, and we'll cover more of that in a bit. If your process is too complicated, it may require 2 SOPs, maybe, or an SOP within an SOP. It happens, right? And then finally, and this is one that I got to point the finger at all of you, leadership deviating from the process. Okay, at the end of the day, everybody here who's on this webinar in some way or another likely has some sort of managerial capacity within an operations, right? I'm going to assume that. Okay, right. So leadership deviating from the process. Well, here's an example of that, because I lived this. So I'm trimming in a room years ago, all PPE to the nines, right? Got my mask, got my smock, got my hairnet, got my glasses, got everything, right? Meanwhile, the guy that owns the spot comes in street clothes, right? Lets his dog run around the facility, which is a whole other thing we'll cover another time in another webinar. And then he goes and he grabs a nug with his bare hand, breaks it open. Oh, this is so fire. And then throws it right back in my trim bin. And I'm like, dude, like, what was the point of all this if you're going to come in and start touching everything with your hands all crazy like, right? So, the leadership of a facility, you are the standard bearer of how things operate at your facility. So if you want to see the change, you got to be the change, right? Okay, cool. All right, I'm done beating you up about why SOPs fail. Let's move on. So preparing to write standard operating procedures. Ironically, an SOP about writing SOPs. Okay. But there is a way that these are done. Okay. So first thing you want to do is you want to observe the procedure, right? I get a lot of people that call me saying, hey, can you write my SOPs? Well, not really, because I kind of have to be there to watch the process take place in most cases. And, like you have to observe it step by step. And the thing about this market is that everybody does things a little different. Some people put molasses in their flush. Some people put citric acid. Some people use plain water. You know what I mean? Like everybody's got their little tip or trick. It's like the cookie industry, right? Mrs. Fields is not the same as Entenmann's, which is not the same as, Famous Amos. You know what I mean? They all do their process a little bit differently. They all make cookies, but they all kind of have, little variations in their process. So what you want to do is take your process and you want to observe it from start to finish, right? So how is this procedure prepared for before they perform it? How did they gather up all their tools? How did they gather up their equipment? How did they organize their workspace? Is that something that needs to be analyzed and reviewed? What steps in the process allow for employees to make choices, right? You want to you want to eliminate, excuse me, options or choices. Because when people have to think on their own, then they're in effect deviating away from your process that you want done in a very controlled fashion. So that said, what steps in the process allow for cross-contamination, distractions, or safety risks? So like, for instance, if you look at this picture here, what do you see as the #1 safety risk? Exactly, the guy in the blue shirt is not wearing hearing protection, right? Okay. So how is the work verified that it has been done correctly? So who is the person and what is the process for signing off and verifying that this happened in the way and manner in which it's supposed to? And lastly, the more eyes you can have on this process, the better. I mean, if you can get 2 or 3 people observing a process together, they're all looking at it from different angles, they're all bringing their own perspectives, and they're all going to catch things that maybe you might not. So teamwork makes the dream work, right? Okay, cool. So then what do you want to do? You want to flow chart the process. So if you flow chart the process and you start to see that you're coming to points where you're making decisions, again, you want to eliminate those decision steps and get something a little bit more on the right, which is, more of like a process step 1, process step 2, 3, 4, etc. Because again, this is about eliminating choice, eliminating options, because that eliminates deviation from your standard operating procedure. as you can see here, here's a standard of a flow chart, right? You have dirty hands. Yes, you add soap, you add water, you wash your hands. Are they still dirty? No, then you're done. Or you go back to start again. Okay, so let's look at the anatomy of an SOP. All right, so the basic elements of an SOP. First and foremost, you have a title, right? You want something that totally explains what it is that they're going to be doing. Then you want to go into the scope. And these are things that you don't want to put too many words into. You want to try to be concise about it, but like say as much as you can with as little as you can. I tend to use the adage that if you had to Western Union the text, right, where you pay like per word or per letter, what would you cut out in order to keep the message essential, but also keep it economical? Okay, so the scope of what you're doing here and how it plays into the bigger picture of the overall operations. You want then SOPs have a purpose. What is the purpose of this particular SOP? Anonymous attendee, will you be making this slideshow available for us for training? Absolutely. You will be getting a link for this. So then you want to move on to definitions, right? Standard operating procedures have definitions. So if you have acronyms or you have specific terms within your process that somebody who may not be as learned needs to know, you want to make sure to include those there. Basic elements of SOPs include roles and responsibilities. So who is doing what and who is responsible for making sure that it is done to specification. Next thing you'll want to include is the materials. What materials do you need, right? So if you're like cutting clones, for example, you need to make sure you have your gloves, and you need to make sure you have your scissors, and you need to make sure you have your trays, and you need to make sure you have your Clonex or whatever it is that you're using. Right? So those materials, you want them to be able to gather up those materials, right? And you want them to have them before they start on the process or the procedure. And that again is your step-by-step list of how you go from start to finish, point A to point B, okay? And then of course, if you have any references that you want to include in that as well, this would include like charts, graphs, the flow chart itself, maybe a picture of what the finished procedure looks like. So somebody has a basis for comparison, any specific like manuals or anything like that, or other SOPs that you need to refer them to in order to complete that particular task. And then of course there is a revision history as well, because SOPs should be periodically reviewed and revised as needed, because processes change, factors change, what have you. You want to stay on top of these. You don't want to just create an SOP and then leave it be, unless, if there's a change, then you need to reflect that change in your standard operating procedure. So that said, let's put special focus on writing it for the person that's actually using it, right? So you need to put it in common language. You want to keep that writing simple, you want to keep it brief, and you want to keep it clear, okay? Like keep it real easy, right? Because you're oftentimes handing this off and sometimes that person's not necessarily familiar with it. So if someone had to pick it up for the first time, uninitiated, would they be able to complete that standard operating procedure? One of the other things that is super important as well is specificity, right? Specific actions. So instead of saying clean the table or clean the floor, you would say mop the floor, right? You want to use action verbs. And you don't want to create generalizations. You want to be able to specifically say, use this tool on this process in this way to prepare this area, okay? You're just basically taking what's in your head and breaking it down into all these parts. So you want to avoid language that can lead to potential decision making. So you want to use words like you must do this, not you may do this, okay? Because again, that creates opportunity for choice and opportunity for deviation. And then as far as like, writing it to the voice, you want to keep it impersonal. You want to avoid words like you, because I think keeping it personal and writing it out to the air. It's like, when you read like, manuals and instructions for products that you buy, it's not like sitting there pointing at you saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. It just says, place batteries in positive and negative or whatever it says, okay? So those are the basic elements of an SOP. So let's write an SOP together, okay? We'll go through this together and you'll see how all the parts kind of fit to each other, okay? So what we are going to do today is we're going to outline the process for changing a HEPA filter within our Filter Revolution unit. For those of you that aren't familiar with Filter, we are a portable HEPA clean room grade air purifier that is designed to remove airborne contaminants, particularly plant and people pathogens, as well as dust, pollen, mold, stuff like that. So frankly, just take this as gospel and take this as truth, is that the air is the dirtiest part of your facility. Okay, most of the things that are lead to plant pathogen problems within your gardens oftentimes start in the air. Okay, like one mold spore turns into a stalk, which turns into 10,000 little mold spores, and all of those are breaking off and going into your facility. Let me go forward. Breaking off, right? Going into your facility. So you need to be able to get those out of the air. And here's your fun fact for the day. A 1 micron body, if you will, a dust particle or a mold spore, 1 micron takes 4.7 hours to fall 1 meter in still air, right? And I'm sure as you're looking back at down your hallway at your facility, and you got like doors opening and closing, and you got HVAC running, and it's coming out of vents and windsocks, and then you got your wall fans or your ceiling fans and what have you. That's a turbulent air environment. So that 1 micron particle will never fall to the floor. It will continually remain in the air. It will continually has the opportunity to lodge onto your clothing, and then you take it to another room, and then boom, bam, you typhoid Mary your whole facility. So this is the procedure for taking the filter, changing the filter out, okay? All right, so again, we start with our basic parts. Our title, a filter HEPA cartridge changeout. The scope of this is to minimize, or the filter removes airborne plant pathogens as part of the facility-wide microbe control program, right? So that's the overall scope of how this plays in. The purpose of this particular SOP is to minimize the release of microbes during the HEPA cartridge changeout process. So if you're changing, like, and this goes, by the way, for your HVAC filtration as well, you know, all the crap that's caught in there, like you just take it and toss it onto the ground and put it in a bag. Do you know how much crap you've just dislodged into your air? And again, remember, it just floats up in the air, right? Turbulent air environments. So there's a way to, you know, there's like a very specific way in which you should be taking your HVAC filters out as well. It's called bag in, bag out. I cover that in the high level microbe control webinar that we did, but in basic, it's just basically keeping a trash bag as close to that filter as you can and pulling it out and knotting it off and then taking it out, which is pretty much what we're going to do here in a second. So we've covered the purpose. Definitions. So in this case, particular definitions, we're doing IPA for isopropyl alcohol and HEPA filter because it should just be defined as high efficiency particulate air filter. Okay. Now, as far as who's participating in this, the roles that are taking that are involved in this process, I'm just calling it a section lead because that sounds like a pretty cool title. So a section lead and their assistant are performing the change, and a cultivation director is there to approve the work. Okay. So as far as materials needed, fresh disposable gloves, a garbage bag, the replacement HEPA cartridge, 70% IPA in a spray bottle. You're like, why 70%, Hadley? Well, the answer to that is it is more effective than 90% IPA because there's more water in 70% IPA, which allows for a longer time to evaporate, ergo a longer contact time on the surface, so that you have more of an opportunity to denature any of the pathogens that are on that surface. Okay, cool. So this is also an opportunity to include any material, safety materials as well. So let's say, for example, like we're going to do this in the context of a filter that's on its casters on the floor because that's just simple and easy and we don't have a bunch of time. But if you, for instance, are taking your filter units and hanging them from the ceiling, well, then you need to make sure that you have whatever relevant safety equipment is needed, be it a ladder or, I don't know, you know, like some sort of fall protection, depending on how high up in the air it is, what have you. So this is an opportunity to include not just like the tools that are needed to perform the actual stuff, but as well to make sure that there's that everybody stays safe, right? Because if you're blowing through a straw in order to move around the facility, not many are ADA compliant, and that's a tough job to perform when you're doing that, right? Okay, so we'll go through the procedure here, and I'm going to list all these 11 points out, and I think that it's important because I just want to kind of get you guys in the mindset of process steps. So here's the procedure. The section lead and the assistant, they put on fresh gloves, right? The section lead unplugs and sprays the wheels for complete coverage with IPA before filter is moved into the hallway, right? So in other words, you're not doing this filter change in the room. You're doing it in the hallway in this particular case, okay? The assistant comes over and unlocks the clasps on the top of the unit, removes the top cover, and holds onto it. Now here you can see that I've added a warning to not touch the inside of the top cover. There may be microbes in there, and then that touch transfer can transfer to doorknobs, and then you can end up spreading stuff around. The next step would be that the section lead places the garbage bag over the entire filter unit, right? This is that bag in, bag out I was talking about. So they place a garbage bag over the whole unit. Step 5, the section lead grabs the HEPA cartridge from the outside of the bag, right? And then the section lead would lift the filter from the outside of the bag and then close off the bag as it clears the top of the filter unit and, tie it off. The section lead then opens the replacement HEPA cartridge and inserts it in place of the old one. The assistant replaces and locks the top cover in place. The assistant then takes the bagged up filter to the trash area, right? And then the section lead will spray the wheels with IPA for complete coverage before returning the filter to its service location and turn on. Then the cultivation director comes over and verifies and signs off that the task is complete. Now, some of you may be looking at this going, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about here? And you forgot to talk about this or whatever. Good. I want you to think that way. I kind of did this relatively incomplete because I want you guys to get into the mode of exercising. Hey, there are more steps to be added here, or there's more clarity that's needed here, or this is not fully explained. Okay, so these are the ways you need to analyze your process steps, because again, you're trusting someone to perform it and they don't live inside your head. Okay, so that said, that's worthy of analysis. And then finally, of course, for references, in this particular case, I'm including the Filter Revolution user manual, as well as your facility microbe control SOP manual. Do you have a facility microbe control SOP? You should. All the cool kids do. And then, of course, this is also an opportunity to add any pictures, any diagrams, any flow charts, or what have you. Then you have the sign off, which is, again, the cultivation lead. They put their name and date on it. And then you have your revision history, which, if you haven't done any revisions, has not changed. So all that to say that you drop this into a Word document, and congratulations, boo bam, you have a completed SOP. Okay. So, and again, keep in mind that SOPs must be tested and revised as needed. Okay. So you kind of want to stay on top of these. And as you can see at the top of this particular sample document, I put the authorization, the last review date, and the last revision date in the header. So anybody that's savvy on a Word document, for example, you can add that as well. However, we will have this actually available for download for you, so you can just pull it yourselves and just fill in all the blanks. Yeah, so there you go. Congratulations. Wow, we blew through this pretty quick. Pretty awesome. I value all of your time. So let's kind of recap a little bit of what we've learned here today. Standard operating procedures used in a wide range of industries to build consistency for your daily operations, right? High level concept. Properly prepare and craft your SOPs with detail in the process and potential hazards in mind. Okay, so you're wanting to keep things very specific and you're wanting to look out for any inherent dangers. You want to properly prepare and craft your SOPs with the audience in mind. You got to write this to the reader. Okay, so make it simple, make it clear, eliminate choice. Okay, total freedom is the absence of choice. If your employees aren't following your standard operating procedures, it could in fact be a problem with the SOP. Tough thing to say here, it could be a problem with the employee. This is why you don't hire your friends, because they take advantage of you and you never, do business with anyone you feel bad taking to court. Just my personal philosophy. And in some cases it's both, so before you fly off the handle about somebody who didn't follow your SOP, it might be worth it to take a step and say, so we outlined this, what happened? What went wrong? Where did you feel like you needed to go in this particular direction? Because ultimately, not coming at it like a crazy person is going to help you refine your SOPs. Okay. In other words, we got to start like running these facilities like, you know, people who work at Coca-Cola and Haagen-Dazs, not like drug dealers, right? Unfortunately. So we got to kind of shake that. So yeah, finally, regularly review, test, and track the revisions of your SOPs. Okay. So that's what it comes down to. Okay. There's a little bit of, unfortunately, a little bit of admin and paperwork that you have to keep up on. Okay. So we do have some questions here that I wanted to address, and of course, offer a hearty thank you for that. So one of the questions I'm seeing here is, where is the best place to store your SOPs? Great question, nebulous answer. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. If you have a quality assurance manager on site, which, by the way, I totally suggest if your facility is big enough to warrant it, getting a QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control person in place, like their whole job is doing this and making sure that the facility stays microbe free, right? You don't have to put this pressure on you, okay? This is where you assemble your Justice League of people, and you got your irrigation expert, and you got your microbe expert, and you got your grow medium expert, and you got your, you know, break room expert. I don't know, whatever a break room expert does. But in any case, so some people will store the SOPs in a binder in an office and hand them out as the calendar dictates, right? Like you got to keep track of everything you want to do on a calendar. Many of you, I'm sure, have a calendar, like a dry erase calendar, on the outside of the door that alerts to like nutrient and foliars and what have you, all the other little process steps that you go through during a grow cycle. So some people place them in a binder in an office. Some people place them in a binder on the outside of the door. And again, you know, you correlate the SOPs that need to be performed on the days that you need to be performing them. So any place that's easily accessible where people are not forgetting to use them. That's the short answer, okay? Again, you know, everybody has their process a little different, so you need to figure out what works for you, but ultimately you need it accessible, because if it sits in a binder in an office and nobody goes into that office, then that SOP is never gonna get pulled out, straight up, okay? We have another question here. How often should SOPs be reviewed? Good question. I would say SOPs oftentimes need to, it wouldn't be a bad idea to review the SOPs on a periodic and regular basis. You know, particularly like as the job is being done, you know, and you probably want to pay close attention to it the first few times that somebody performs that SOP. Simply because you want to be able to establish a pattern that they're doing it correctly. And then you'll want to review your SOP in like, let's say there's a change in place. Let's say you switch to a different kind of cleanser, or you switch to a different, let's say you make the change from soil, which is inherently loaded with microbes. Sorry, soil growers, I love you guys. But let's say you make a change to a more inert grow medium, right? Like, then you need to review your SOPs. So if you make a change to your process, you're likely going to have to make a change to your SOP. Let's see here, another question. Are there people or services who write SOPs? Yes, there are. They're widely available on the internet. In fact, I believe a couple of people are actually here on this webinar. So let me give a special shout out to Sky Hank at Smoke and Mirrors, who you can find on the Instagram at Smoke and Mirrors. There is also, where I saw Andrew Wood, there he is. Andrew Wood at ASI. They work primarily in the food service industry, if I got that correct. You can find him on the Instagram at Growing and Grilling, because growing and grilling are two pretty darn awesome things. So yes, there are people who do write them, and you know, it's just not me, because I don't have time. I love you guys, but I'm more than happy to tell you how to do it. You know, there are people who make their whole living off of doing these types of things. So let's see here. Here's a question. How do you distinguish between processes that need very detailed granular instructions and those where high-level guidance would be okay? for example, or that is, how do you manage trade-offs between spending time on documentation and thinking through your process and focusing on other operational tasks? Wow, that's a big question. Okay, so let me see if I can unpack this a little bit. I think it depends on like what the critical nature, like the level of critical care that's needed in that process. So granted, you should likely treat all of your processes with the same level of care. But I think that like if you're talking about mopping a floor, yeah, you can have a little bit more of a process step mentality, but it depends on the intricacy of the operation to be performed. I mean, you know, again, you're taking what's in your head and putting it out on paper. So if what's in your head is very detailed, then naturally, of course, your SOP is going to be very detailed. And, you know, like as far as the trade-off is concerned, what's an SOP worth that doesn't accomplish the task? It's not worth jack, right? So when it comes to SOPs, in many cases, you're getting out of it what you put into it. So if you put the same level of attentiveness and care of mopping a floor in that SOP as you do in cutting clones, or vice versa, at the end of the day, a high level of attention is going to bode well and yield benefits for any process that you apply this to. So, you know, like with all due respect, the question kind of smacks of like, how much work do I really need to put into this, right? You know, like that's just kind of the impression that I'm getting. And at the end of the day, the answer to the question is you get out of it what you put into it, okay? So it depends on how well you want your SOPs to be successful, because if you're writing SOPs and they're continually deviated from, then you need to go back and put that extra care into it. So why not put that in on the front end? And then now you're kind of just maintaining and fine tuning the knobs versus just kind of vomiting on a paper, handing it off to someone, and then somebody just doesn't, they're not in your head. They're not in your vision, you know? So you get out of it what you put into it. I don't think that that's a wrong answer, unless anybody has something to say about it. Okay, so here was another question. Are there SOP templates anywhere I can download? Yes, Google. You can literally Google SOP template. Want to know how I know that? Because I did it. Now, you can probably refine your search for SOPs for cannabis. And I think there's a company called Trym, T-R-Y-M, that I came across. I think they're like part consultancy or what have you. I noticed that they had a download for an SOP around cannabis. Frankly, I didn't download it. Sorry, I didn't do my homework on that one. But that said, you can take any SOP form and modify it to your specific needs. Or, I don't know, shocker here, I may have done a lot of this work for you and simplified the process. And this SOP that I did, that you and I did together, the royal you and I, we did together, will be available for download as well. Is it going to be in one neat page like that? No, because I needed to do this for purposes of example. But at the end of the day here, you know, your SOP may have enough process steps that it rolls over into a page 2 or a page 3 or what have you. But, you know, it's like if that's the process that it takes to accomplish the task and you need to be able to trust somebody to do it outside of your supervision, then it requires that level of detail. So Trym, yeah, there you go. Trym's a great company. Somebody is endorsing it. Michael's endorsing it right there. So we're kind of at the end of this here. And I do want to thank you all. Is there an SOP app? I don't know. That's a good question. I did not research that, admittedly. You stumped the moderator. Ta-da! But you know, again, you have access to this at any time. You're going to be receiving an email as a follow-up to this webinar that is going to have this link to this video with these slides and documents attached to it. So you have something complete, okay? Yes, please do, Jared, hit me up on IG. So for those of you that aren't aware, or I don't know, somehow or another, you found your way to this webinar through some other means, you are always, I highly encourage you to reach out to me. Again, my name is Jason Hadley. I work with Filter as made by Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions. You can feel free to email me at jhadley@golighthouse.com if you ever want to chat about Filter or what have you. You can also find me on the gram at DyslexicsStoner402. Dyslexic Stoner 402. If you got the joke, we should talk. Anyway, so that said, that's kind of where we are. Oh, let me also make an announcement here because it got pushed down in the chat. Couple of little housekeeping things before I let you go. I mean, you can hit the hang up button at any time, but let me just say, again, please make sure to stay on the line here and complete our survey. One of the main questions that I tend to pay particular attention to is, what do you guys want to see on the next webinar? Like, what's the information that you guys are craving, okay? Yeah, we sell air filtration, I get it, but it's part of the overall solution. We want to be able to help you have a complete microbe control program, right? So customer service is key with us, and making sure that your process is more as complete as possible, because like we come from clean rooms and crazy stuff like that. We have this knowledge. So, and I know you guys are thirsty for it. That's how we got to this SOP webinar to begin with. So do make sure you complete the short survey. Also, I did a great article in Growzine that starts to present a lot of the questions around high-level microbe control through the guise of powdery mildew on tomatoes, right? Tomatoes, right? We covered that. Remember those days when you couldn't say bong in a head shop? Anyway, and then finally, special announcement here. We will be publishing a new article in a magazine called Analytical Cannabis this upcoming month. For those of you that don't know Analytical Cannabis is the magazine of record for cannabis that needs to be analyzed. Okay. So it's coming out this month. Everyone that attended this webinar will get first access to read the article, and we'll send a copy as soon as it's published. I'm not quite sure what the publication date is on that, but we captured your email, so you know when you signed up. So and we're never gonna let you go. No, I'm kidding. Listen, it's all designed to help you be a smarter, more efficient grower. Okay, that's when you're successful, you scale up. When you scale up, you get rich. Okay, so that said, let me just check here real quick. All this information, and they still want it done for them. Yes, that is well, cannabis. You know, I mean, that's what it's all about. Like, I get it, man. Like, this is microbe control. This is the last muscle that a lot of cannabis facility operators have had to flex, and nobody wants to take the time to learn it, right? I get it. You got all these other hats you're wearing in the day. So cool. My job is to set it up for you, to tee it up for you as easily as possible. Okay, so thank you for the kudos. Thank you guys for attending. Can I tell you where these slides will be available for download? Here's what we're going to do is we're going to email all of the attendees of this webinar, and that way you'll have this link. I will also be posting it on my IG page at nauseam. Trust me, I'm going to make sure you guys don't forget this. Okay, so that's it for us. You guys have been awesome. Look at that. We're ending a little early, so you guys can get back to your day. Have a great one. Please feel free to hit me up, and let's call it done. All right. You guys are good. Thank you.